I hope you all are mulling over much food for thought as we prepare for our last two panels of the day. Of course, we all are anticipating and looking forward to visiting Washington Park, and so the next two panels are designed to let us know what has happened in the past, what's happening now, and to have us thinking about ways that we can advance this remarkable park behind us. So our first panel is going to look at the master plan that you all have heard referenced on a number of occasions. The plan is in your materials, in the packet we sent out to you in advance. I hope you all had a chance to take a look at it, because as you've heard, many of the issues it talks about, image, circulation, wayfaring, are all issues that continue to be interesting challenges today. And then I hope you will have looked at other materials, including those things about engagement in the park, Urban Ecology Center, Washington Park Wednesdays, so that you are abreast of the activities that we will hear about momentarily. And I want to just do another shout out to Kevin Driscoll, who, thanks to Peter Bergelis, whom we heard from earlier, who helped really push the creation of a friends group. Kevin has valiantly been pulling folks together and meeting on a regular basis, and really trying to build, I think, on energy from the Olmsted Bicentennial as we look at this great park. So you will see in this panel those who were previously involved in the master plan, as well as Dane Maddox, who was not involved in that plan, but who nevertheless remains critically involved in the park, and particularly looking at the lagoon. So with that, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dee Dee, and thank you for inviting us here today. It's my pleasure and honor to be part of the Olmsted Network Conference, and to be here with the panel. So Dave is with he's the owner of Amaranth Bakery, and yeah, so thank you, Dave, for all the delicious treats this morning. And Allyson Nemec, Quorum Architects. Thank you, Allyson, for the efforts on the Washington Park revitalization plan. And Dane Maddox, retired U.S. Forest Service, correct? Yes, all right. And the panel here is active participants with the Washington Park Friends Group. We've been meeting on about a monthly basis, and we had an effort to create this new Friends Group, and there's opportunities and challenges. What happened post-COVID was there was a Washington Park Partners Group, and that no longer existed. And Washington Park Partners, one of the things that is a visible initiative that they had was the playground structures that were implemented throughout Washington Park. But after COVID, that organization no longer existed, so County Supervisor Bergelis had reached out to invite various stakeholders, people that are interested in the park, in meeting back up, following paper filing from Pete Cooney, who is the Pete's Pops. So it's that Pete's Pops that you're enjoying is even more integrated into this discussion that you may have known. So enjoy Pete's Pops. It's a delight for everyone at Washington Park Wednesdays. So this Friends Group became a thing again, and it was reestablished, and it's under the Park People's financial status as a 501c3. And then Dee Dee had just asked me to identify a couple opportunities and challenges with the Washington Park Friends Group. And some of the opportunities that I wanted to go through here before getting into our questions was just being able to collaborate with county staff, as it's a county park. So it's been really good to have the county present at our meetings. There's key stakeholders, entrepreneurs, business owners, subject matter experts, directors of business improvement districts, volunteers, and nonprofit organizations like UMCS, Adrian, and the Urban Ecology Center. I thought I saw Terry here too. Did. Okay. So there's a lot of great people that are involved in the Washington Park Friends group and effort. Some of the challenges that we're facing and starting back up is there's always group organization and dynamics, but it's been a really good, positive energy with a lot of focus on the park. So we're working through governance and bylaws, and as a startup, financing different initiatives like media and our outreach and communications. Then we have sub-working groups to address issues and concerns like access into the park and access around the park. And then mapping of all the different things that are going on and tracking the projects and the events in the park, like the Washington Park Wednesdays, in addition to other things. So thank you, Melissa, for all your efforts on Washington Park Wednesdays. And thank you again for being participants in the Washington Park Wednesdays, or excuse me, Washington Park Friends. And Wednesdays, I see you all there, and for being leaders of this Washington Park Friends and being on this panel. So the focus of the questions that are here are related to the revitalization plan that was established in 2000. So the intent is to explore this plan and how it informs our current thinking. So as you know, nearly 2 decades ago, a revitalization plan was created for Washington Park. And it recognizes the significance of Olmsted Park and outlines key findings. In addition to the lagoon, the structures, paths, and parking lots, it also addresses image, safety, circulation, and wayfinding. So for each one of you, would you please address how these have been addressed and what needs to be revisited and what we can take away from the report?
Am I on? No. Here we go. Okay. So I guess first of all, a little introduction. From my perspective, the importance of the park starts before you even land in the neighborhood. I know when I was looking for a home in '96, the park was one of the 4 legs of the stool, the proverbial stool, to make me say, this is a good neighborhood to be in. And the neighborhood that I live in is Washington Park, generally considered these days, but more specifically Walnut Hills, so 5 blocks to the east. And without that quarter-mile, large 120-acre park, quarter mile away from my house, I probably would have said, I don't know enough about the neighborhood. I don't know enough about the organizations. I don't know any neighbors because I'm a new homeowner. So I think I'll look somewhere else. So that's the role that this park does play, can play, ought to play in the future. And I think we've heard from many people on that as well. I don't know if it made it into the plan per se back in 2000, but the plan, I must say, was probably one of the most impactful and valuable plans that I've been involved with and participated in. And believe me, there have been a few in Milwaukee in the past 25 years that I've been here, either helping direct or and coordinate or just passively attending. Now, a number of the projects, we look at the park today and say, oh, gee whiz, there's so much that needs to be done. We had that momentary snapshot. In fact, quite a bit has been accomplished. Urban Ecology Center was invited into the park, and the negotiations were begun after the plan was created because it was necessary to have an entity that was doing significant programming within the park boundaries to make the park more welcoming, get the next generation, get our youth engaged with the park, because that's where the investment happens. Shoreline restoration. It was begun because cattails are cattails and they keep going. And so shoreline restoration was begun shortly after UEC came into the park. The bandshell, of course, a tremendous investment by Harley-Davidson, and hopefully, Allyson, maybe you can touch a little bit more on that later on. The pool, I believe that the pool was, well, we do have the splash pad now. There was none beforehand. And the pool was about a 15-year restoration, I should say, a restoration made so that the pool could be used for the next maybe 10 to 15 years, and that's now run its course. So I believe there's the aquatic study underway presently at the county level. Events, MSO came back to the park for their summer music series, and that, of course, has led to the Washington Park Wednesdays. There were numerous events that were private events that were very successful, whether as Washington Bark, where we bring in thousands of people and their canine companions, and had remarkably successful events and actually good fundraising tools as well. Let's see, the ball fields, another major investment, thank goodness, to, I'm not sure where that pot of money came from, but we now have a new set of ball fields reconstituted into multi-use fields. I think the list goes on, but I'm going to leave it there for the next person to cover.
Yeah, I do think that the plan set up a good framework, but really it set up a good friend-work. We originally came into this planning process inheriting a stakeholder group that was provided to us by the two county supervisors from both sides of the park. And there's really not two sides to the park. A lot of times that comes out, but there's like 5 sides to the park, you know? And they all had different demographics and different interests and different hot buttons. And really the planning process allowed those groups to come together and realize that we all wanted the same things. We all wanted a safe place for our kids to play. We really wanted that Olmsted vision of a park for all, and really wanted to enjoy basically the same things, perhaps in a little bit of a different way, from place to place. And I think it also made myself and the co-author, who I can't say enough of, who was unable to be here today, James Steiner, who I know a lot of you know, who's a brilliant landscape architect, and my co-author, or I'm the co-author, he's the author. And so I think what we became very aware of was, you know, because people that look like James and I weren't as prevalent in the park, that didn't mean that the park wasn't a living, breathing, very successful park for the people that were picnicking and playing ball and doing what they were doing in the park. And it was sort of it wasn't really a revitalization plan so much as it was, I guess it was a revitalization plan. It wasn't, the park wasn't dead. And I still hear that today. You know, I mean, it can be better. And I just also want to give and the group that came out of this was called, first was called Neighbors United for Washington Park. And that was one of the proudest moments of my career, was going in front of county parks and having all of the stakeholders who all thought they had a different vision come together and support this plan. And then there's groups that came out of it. Like, I want to give a shout out to Adrienne because she hasn't been thought of, but the idea of What's Good Washington Park being a website that talks about what's good in Washington Park. Because, you know, a lot of what we found was people thought that they were unsafe because not everybody was using the park the way they used the park or looked like them or whatever the case may be. But there was really very little incident. And we were drawing on these like perceived negatives instead of really talking about the positive things that are happening. So I just want to say that and Washington Park Wednesdays and the possibility, you know, all of us coming together for a diversely planned concert series that can attract all 5 of our neighborhoods kind of around the park. You know, so small interventions, and I know my time is up, but I'm going to keep talking anyway. Like Like
I couldn't see it either.
like removing all of the hard benches in the back of the park costs barely nothing. To allow people to picnic in the park and really take on that little piece of Olmsted's vision. You know, things that were also done, were a lighting upgrade, a pathway upgrade, which needs to be re-upgraded. And there were all these quick wins, and then the concert series and Washington Park Wednesdays I can't speak highly enough about, as well as Urban Ecology Center, writing about, it's kind of like journaling and having it happen, like we need a community stakeholder to come in and take over the boathouse and really have eyes on the street from day to day. And then to have Urban Ecology come in, whose mission is to connect people with nature. And what possibilities there are for that to continue to have the next generation take on this park.
Thank you. As Kevin mentioned, I used to work for the U.S. Forest Service. I'm a hydrologist by training, and I sort of feel like I'm the bat boy on a major league team because there's some impressive people to work with, both at this meeting, and I thank you all for being in Milwaukee and for for having this conversation. And it's a very impressive team. The people that I have met in my short time working on the Washington Park area, they're phenomenal people committed to the park, the community, the well-being, and the future. As I was driving here this morning, you don't usually try to drive around 8 o'clock in the morning because it's too crazy of traffic. But I went by half a dozen schools, and I was reminded of why this work is so important, because it's not necessarily for me, it's for the kids, the future, and for the communities. And so it's a privilege to be here, and I commend you for this. In working with the Friends Group, and I want to thank the hard work of the county, the Supervisor Bugelis in helping get the Friends Group together, our other partnerships and relationships that we've developed, and I think we're really starting to get some momentum. The plan, this 2000 plan, as I've mentioned, I've written lots of plans, scores of plans, and this is one of the best I've ever read. And I think almost all of the basic principles and concepts that were identified in this plan are equally valid today. The basic issues, the concern about circulation and the image and the wayfinding are critical elements, as we've heard all morning, fundamental elements to the Olmsted design, fundamental aspects of this park, and as valid today and tomorrow as they were before. Again, compliments to the people who put the plan together, to Allyson and James Steiner and others. They interviewed or had surveyed almost 600 people. And that's a huge turnout. I mean, anyway, I don't need to go in my failed planning efforts, but, and in there they've documented the need and the expectations and the hopes. With Kevin and others, we've recently done another kind of survey, and those same issues, values, needs, are valid today as they were 20 years ago. Also, Allyson and others have worked closely with the city to start working on better access to the park. There's a new, safer street crossing going in, and you'll see it when we go on the walk today, or at least we'll be near it, to get from the east side of the park into the park. And there's some challenges coming to the park from the east and from the north. But let me jump quickly to the lagoon. This has come up a couple of times, and this is where I may have a little bit of an added perspective to bring to the conversation, is the lagoon needs some work, clearly, and we'll see that today. And I want you to think about the lagoon as we walk into the park this afternoon. We'll be coming from here, headed north, and we'll come up to a ridge. And that's where Schiller and Goethe are standing overlooking the pavilion. That's the top of the lagoon watershed. The lagoon is about 10 acres in surface area. The watershed's about 30 acres. And so as you stand next to Goethe and Schiller, if you look north and hold your arms out, you pretty much will be defining the boundaries of that watershed. And a watershed is the shape of the land where the water moves toward a common point, whether it's a stream, a creek, a lake, in this case, the pond. The pond is basically a basin. There's really no outflow to it. And so it's dependent upon the water that's in that watershed to keep it full, but that's not enough, so it gets augmented by pumping from the city. And that's another partnership with the city, helping to make the park a better place for everyone. My time's up, but we'll come back to some of this, but I want to make sure that we need to think about the watershed as a whole ecosystem. It's not just the water. There's a mile and a half of shoreline. Because there's an island. So if you take the shoreline of the lagoon and the shoreline of the island, it's almost a mile and a half of shoreline. And that's some of the most critical ecological habitat in the park, where you have the wet and the dry together, vegetation, bird habitat. It's some of the most critical view shed, as you try to have nice views of the park. Right now, the lagoon is pretty much surrounded by invasive tall trees. You really can't see the lagoon from far or up close. There's uplands to the watershed, to the west side. That's where the Urban Ecology Center has been doing some habitat conversion. I may just mention there's about 3 miles of trails within that watershed. Circulate around the lagoon and take you to and from the lagoon and around and behind the band shell and take you off toward the Urban Ecology Center or back toward this end of the park. So you need to think of this as a watershed system, and people are an integral part of that system. And I think that may be one way to help us start tying together different projects and do it in a more holistic and future context. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Next question that we have here is that right now there's a lot of things going on. There's a process to reimagine 175 on the west corridor that's underway. The pool is being assessed by the county. There's new signs being considered, wayfinding signs around the park, and the Urban Ecology Center building is under construction. So based on your experiences, what processes would you consider for making major decisions about the future of Washington Park? And this is a multiple part question. Is it time to seek a new comprehensive restoration and management plan, such as addressing safety and that blends the vegetation, like Dane had spoke about around the lagoon? And who should be at the table? So finally, what criteria, such as Olmsted's original vision and plan and today's needs and cost, should be developed to make these decisions?
That's a mouthful.
Yeah. That was the question. Let me know if you need me to repeat anything or touch base.
Let's see. Certainly yes to at least revisiting the plan, because unfortunately right now we have a situation where all too often, which is approximately every 5 years, we'll leave it at that, someone, typically an entity, an organization, institution, whatever, will use the demographic deficiency studies or data, census data, to say, look at this poor community, this is what we can provide, and there's some public space that we can do it in, and what we want to do is put in another, whatever it might be. And without a plan, without clarity on what our mission is, without a narrative that reasserts what the community has already stated about what they wish to see in the park, you have no response, because usually they're well funded, and usually the first folks that they talk to are either elected officials, which do enjoy a good groundbreaking or ribbon cutting, and they assume that this is what people would want because it's something new. That's not necessarily the case in many instances. And so I think the important thing is to make sure that all sides of the park would be represented, but the park is represented or needs to be part of a much bigger narrative or scenario than just the community, because it isn't just a community park. The county has reinstated over and over again that it is a regional park and has regional amenities. And so how does it fit into that bigger mission? And how does it help? Unfortunately, you mentioned 175, you mentioned, well, even 40th Street. What happens in the surrounding neighborhoods directly affects the park, and what is inside the park directly affects how surrounding neighborhoods feel either welcome or not welcome into the park. So we've had about, well, 40 years of trying to get into the park across 40th Street, and it is like taking your life into your hands. Rarely can kids get into the pool site from Galena Street, for example, which we might get out during the tour to see, because there's no place that vehicles stop along 40th Street, Lisbon, Lloyd, until they get to Valete Street. So needless to say, they're doing 50 miles an hour. This is a city street. Fortunately for 175, Highway 175 on the other side of the park, there are at least bridges where you are not dancing over hoods and dodging bumpers. So that's one such example. We're finally getting somewhere on this issue, and it's getting traffic improvements and traffic calming measures. Wayfinding, we're working on it. Washington Park is a fascinating park because it is the five-sided park that Allyson is referring to, and there are a number of different components to it. Whether it was the zoo back in the day, or whether it's the senior center today, whether it's the pool, urban ecology center, the ball fields, wherever you enter, you're never sure where each one of these components are until either you ask someone, if you find someone, or you walk around the park and then finally get to where you're trying to go. So we're working on that. Matter of fact, a small bequest has been provided by a thoughtful park supporter to do that sort of work, and so we're working on it. I will pass it on to Allyson.
Sure. Dane, you want to go? It's totally up to. Go ahead.
Just to build on a couple points Dave made, there's the idea, well, there's a library, a wonderful new library, Washington Park Library, that is immediately north of the park, but there's a street, major street, and it's a convergence of a variety of streets, and it's a very complex intersection. So we're working with the state, and this is early stages, because they're thinking about rebuilding Highway 175, which borders the park on the west. And when they do that, we can work on them with different safer crossings and turnings and signalings to try to make it, because you really can't, it's almost impossible to get to the park from the north. And then, as I mentioned, Adrian has been working with the city and others to change and increase the accessibility and safe crossing from the east. So that access is, we knew that, it's in the plan, but we know it's even more critical to work at it now. The signage and finding your way around, there's been some concerns with the overgrowth of vegetation and making it difficult to see around the bend in a little pathway. So then people are reluctant to take that walkway. So one of the concepts in the plan is what's called the middle plane view. Is that right? Middle plane theory. And you can explain that if you would, please, because it's critical to what you say.
The concept is if vegetation is high and vegetation is low to knee height, and you can see through, your perceived safety is greater. And it's a basic landscape architectural theory.
And it's discussed in the plan, and it's even more urgent now because if things are more overgrown. The other thing is, I think it was Patricia McDonald. She was, and we're going to get the PowerPoint, but she had some very good examples and discussion of things to do to integrate vegetation and other features. You can have natural growing native grasses or other vegetation going back to the middle plain theory, that could, increase the quality of habitat, which is a very important component of urban ecology centers, and I applaud their work, because that's one of the main things that could really make the park richer, is to increase the habitat and the education and learning about that. But to start exploring some other ways to maybe do a combination of natural habitat restoration work and also helping with the image and view shed, and so you can better see and enjoy things. Around the lagoon, again, things are overgrown. We need to create some openings. I think it was Virginia showed a slide earlier of young kids and some adults with people fishing along the edge of the lagoon. There's really only 2 places right now where you can fish around the edge of the lagoon, and those are even somewhat overgrown. So we want to try to increase the opportunity for people to enjoy the lagoon. That gets back to this watershed idea of looking at all the things that make up this area, including people and their enjoyment and use of the park. So again, just before I forget, when we go to visit when we go on our walk today, the lagoon level, as I mentioned, it's been a very dry year, obviously. The water level is very low. New bridges are going to be put in by the county, I believe, in the spring. The Urban Ecology Center is in the process of the boathouse being taken down, and a new building will be in its footprint. Those are things that you're going to see the lagoon in kind of its raw, rough shape right now. The water's down. Partly because construction is going to be going underway. But again, it's a vibrant, critical component of the park. It always has been, and it's an important part of the socialization, sharing, and use, as Virginia was talking about earlier.
Again, I go back to the part of the question that asked who should be at the table and who should be involved in this next stage, wherever it is. I kind of agree with what everybody said. I think it's a pretty darn good plan, and it's a little rusty, and it needs to be cleaned up and go forward. But I think what's really the most important is who's planning and their continued involvement moving forward. I think there was I think I first met Dane when he came to the Bridges public meeting. I've been working in the park for years, working with the Urban Ecology Center, and I didn't really know what the Bridges plan was going to be. So I came to the public meeting to find out what that was going to be. And, then I found out that people didn't really know what the Urban Ecology Center was doing. And I didn't know about the crosswalks project. And so one of our initial Washington Park Friends agendas was to try and get this stuff all in one place so that we can all kind of know what everybody else is working on, what our top priorities are, what our agendas are. And we're kind of a grassroots effort to kind of keep those discussions happening. But it can only work as well as our ability to know what everybody's really trying to do. I think we have great representation in our county supervisor, and like him knowing what our hot buttons are and us knowing what his initiatives are for the park and for the general neighborhood have been great. Our communications are great. Terry getting through his building process and being with us and starting to chat about what's next for them, and setting up their temporary home in the pool house. Might have a water agenda coming forward. I think everybody's aligned, and really that's, to me, the important thing of everybody should be invited to the table, and everybody should openly chat about what their hot buttons are and what their initiatives are going forward, and what their concerns are, and what their hopes and dreams are. So to continue those discussions, write them down, update the plan, I think would be terrific. But really knowing what everybody's doing is a key component of the success of this overall effort.
Well, thank you so much for the panel discussion on these questions. We appreciate the dialogue, and there's more questions, and there's only so much time in the day. And I appreciate all their efforts and look forward to continuing to collaborate. And with that, I could open it up for questions from the audience, if there are any. Yes, yes.
I just have a very brief comment. When you're redoing the lagoon, people love to fish. Think about some handicapped accessible spots, because that's really key these days.
Yes, I don't know if you heard the question, but to make certain we look. Yes, thank you. The comment was, or question was, as we think about the lagoons and fishing and other access things, make sure that you consider universal accessibility. And absolutely, and I have to constantly remind myself of that, because it's very important, and everybody benefits from universal accessibility. It's not just to serve someone. I mean, we all benefit from it, so thank you.
Yes, there's another question. The microphone's coming.
Me again. You seem to put a lot of value on consensus around what people's goals are, and say that they've pretty much reflect now what they did in the past. Are there any areas in which consensus is not currently happening, and how are you dealing with that?
Good question. There we go. I think the one of the greatest concerns is getting a wide spectrum of folks to the table to begin to really decide what it is that there is either consensus around or tension around. And the problem when you just have, whether it's a particular organization or a particular squeaky wheel saying, this is great, this is perfect, no, this is not so great, so you lose the bigger picture. And so I think that the issue right now, because the plan is 20 years aged, because there have been successes, because there have been things that weren't completed, there's itches for the things that haven't been done, and the things that were done, maybe they're getting tired by now, because it's been 20 years. I think some of the potential tension spots, which I think are more manufactured than real, quite frankly. I think the tension spots can easily be remedied by discussion and by a fuller understanding of how pieces are operating. Back 20 years ago, we still had county supervisors saying, well, if security is an issue, we can flatten the sucker. We don't need to have any terrain. So we're not at that point. 20 years ago, the reason we started Washington Park Dog Days was because there were still signs in the park saying no dogs. Not no unleashed dogs, no dogs, period. When I know for a fact, and I saw on the east side regularly, the time that women would walk was when they could walk their strollers, their kids, with a dog and feel safe. And it took some, earth moving to do that, but generally speaking, on that side of town, the sheriff's department didn't pull over and ticket women with strollers with dogs. So bad PR. So I would say that, those are the sorts of tension points. So, and in fact, a dog park would be one of those strange issues. Have a dog park, not have a dog park. I think we talked about that in the original plan. It keeps coming up. Is that a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Generally speaking, I think it probably plays as not such a great idea because it's not an attended space. It would be great if there's programming around it so people can, if Humane Society or something like that was doing dog classes, but at the same time, there's a whole bunch of what ifs when you start doing that. So I think that's as far as I can go with it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that when we inherited the stakeholder group, everybody thought they had unique challenges. And I think the wonderful outgrowth of that, it isn't necessarily that we have consensus, but we really have the same high-arching goals. We might have different ways to get there, but as David said, the ability to talk to one another and to really keep to those high-arching goals, given our different stakeholder groups, city, county, Washington Park Wednesdays, the Urban Ecology Center, the soccer group, the the soccer groups, the kickers, yeah.
Bike polo.
Right, right. So I mean, there's just, and then the aquatic center, which has kind of been a bit dormant. It's really those same high-arching goals, and I think a lot of if we can have people continue to talk openly and keep those high-arching goals of a park for all, and try and make it that vision, and people refer to the Olmsted vision. That really to me is the park for all, and how we get there. Could be a lot of different ways. I mean, I think there are overall characteristics that have been talked a lot about today of an Olmsted design that we come back to. But really that park for all and the characteristics there are what we should be setting as that top vision, and then the implementation to get there.
I have the mic, so.
I'm sorry, one more just super quick thing on that topic. A plan is also not just for the sake of the plan, but, sorry. Am I on now? Yeah. The plan is first to create a plan, but it's also an organizing tool. And it's a tool, just like Allyson had said, that all of a sudden people come together and all of a sudden things happen because people have been talking to each other and networking. And so that's you have to think of the plan as a living object, as an organizing tool, and also as a document that you have right there.
Thank you. And then we need to wrap up here, but one quick question.
It's not actually a question. We all acknowledge that Frederick Law Olmsted was an expert. So I want to advocate for, everybody's talking about people being at the table. I want to see the forestry professors. I want to see the engineers. I want to see the academics. I want to see the research. I want to see the master educators all contributing their knowledge. So it's not just random people with passions, but really we're relying on experts because they're out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a real quick follow-up on that. At the Urban Ecology Center, groundbreaking, Cheryl Nen with the Riverkeeper approached me about an opportunity for a community advisory grant, and that discussion with Dane about having the lagoon improvements occur following a 2019 study that the Urban Ecology Center did about lagoon improvements. MATC, Milwaukee Area Technical College was in discussions with us. Cheryl Nen and the Riverkeeper talked with us. This is about the area of concern where the three rivers meet. EPA is funding legacy cleanup of constituents of concern down at the estuary at Lake Michigan. So an opportunity for community outreach and engagement and activities in the park with MATC is in the works, and I was speaking, I'm not sure, the library, earlier today about having additional meetings there and having additional literature. So there's a lot of very good synergies happening. with respect to experts being able to speak to specific items.
And I at this point want to say thank you to the panel, and I want to just follow up briefly on that, because we were talking about the Olmsted way. We've heard that several times, the double entendre, the triple entendre. And I think when we look at the Olmsted way, it was very collaborative. It insisted on input by a variety of experts, as has been outlined. And it was holistic, as Virginia talked about this morning. And I think as I hear about all of these exciting developments in the park, and there are multiple ones, and we have all conceded we need to figure out what they are and we need to number them. I would hope that as we think about the Olmsted vision and Parks for All, that we also not think that it's everything that everybody has ever thought of. That's not the Olmsted vision. There's a wonderful, wonderful cartoon that was in the New Yorker many years ago, and it included everything that everybody wanted in Central Park, and there was no park left. And so I think as we go forward, one of the challenges and opportunities for Washington Park is to have that bigger vision and to prioritize, because you can't have everything or you will lose the soul of the park. And I think right now there's a lot of itching, as David has said, there's a lot of excitement, there's movement, and I think trying to figure out then that big picture, that holistic perspective that Virginia talked about this morning is going to be one of the really big challenges.
Sorry, just very quickly, the room's full of expertise, knowledge. If you have any suggestions, references, literature, contacts, information, anything to share with us, please, you can send it to Virginia.
Send it to the Olmsted Network.
Send it to the Olmsted Network, because we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.